analysis, no doubt. Considering the fact that we've been a monocultural economy for 63 years, and nearly half of those times we've also been concerned about diversification. But what have we done in concrete terms, to bring this about? How serious are we, in the direction of expanding our income base, considering our potentials, which has been rightly highlighted in agriculture, in solid minerals, and of course, even in tourism. What have we done? Of course, we know that we may not necessarily be talking about tourism now because of questions of insecurity. But what about solid minerals? Of course, opportunities are bound in that area. Agriculture too, still opportunities are still there, are plenty. But beyond all of this is for us to also be concerned about the value, the kind of value that we exhibit as citizens, our kind of orientation towards nation building, towards what is can be associated as our collective property, our Nigerianness. What kind of value are we bringing to the table? This is an intangible that can rub off on all the physical elements that we are highlighting, be it the economy, be it politics, be it culture. If we do not have faith in the system, it becomes a problem for the physical aspects to manifest, to progress, as the case could be. Our attitude to nation building as citizens is still problematic. We have little or no faith, and that's why we can see it dovetailing into failures failures to guarantee transparency, accountability in public expenditure process, and in their attitude towards public resources. Yes, we're talking about strengthening the economy. Yes, we're talking about expanding our resource base. But what do we do with these resources afterwards? Most of the time, we unfortunately fritter away these resources, and in frittering them in a way, we're taking them to economies that are far stronger than our own. Trusting only in luxuriation, trusting only in pleasure making, at the expense of sustainable economic endeavors. That will probably help generations that will come after us, including our own, including the present generation as well. So these things have to be looked at, from a holistic point of view. Remember, I said it's okay for us to focus on the physical, the tangible, but in focusing on these tangibles, we also have to be mindful of the intangible. Because progress doesn't come only by looking at items that you can consider mechanical. Items that are out there alone. The mind also matter. How do we reorient our minds, towards trusting in our collectivity, in a nation called Nigeria. For now, arguments have been made that we are still a nation state. We can hardly call ourselves a nation. Yes, we have nations within this nation state. Sometimes we mistake this for ethnic nationality. We have plenty of nations, no doubt. Sometimes people also mistake it for ethnicities. And that's why we say, okay, it's a nation state, and not yet a nation. But how do we transfer? How do we move from just being a nation state to nation? What the element that matters more in the construction of nation is actually, the intangible, which is the attitude towards the entity called Nigeria, as the case could be.
All right, Professor Ango, if you can hear us, the latest intervention by Professor Biodun Adeniyi speaking about the intangibles, and perhaps one looks at some of the, guiding principles of democracy. You say government for the people. Have we been able to connect with the people over time? Yes, the President, aptly touched on, 7 consecutive governments, in terms of electoral cycles, without interruption and all that. But when we look at, connecting with the people themselves, are we getting the buy-in of the Nigerian? The last administration actually saw something that was a little bit bizarre in the fact that you provide critical infrastructure like rail lines, and then tracks are being removed by the citizens themselves when you provide critical infrastructure, and then you see such, response from those who are supposed to be the receivers, and, people should be jubilating over the provision of some of these amenities. What are your comments on this at this time, and how do we now connect with the people so that there's a complete buy-in in these projects?
What we need what we need basically is a situation, what we have is a situation whereby the gap is so much. You know, in Nigeria, as we have the top rich that are there, and those that are poor are so many. So that means basically we have a wide gap. We don't have the middle class anymore. So that, I mean, also brings us to the point whereby we have a high volume of or number of or incidents of poverty as we have in the country. So the implication, of course, is that while the political class, you know, especially those with positions in either executive or legislature, are seen to be doing very well, you know, they are swimming literally in money. Those who are downtrodden, who are at the bottom of the ladder, are actually very poor. You know, people are not being able to, like it's been said, you know, afford $1 a day, you know, on the average. So with that kind of margin, with that kind of widespread disparity, what we need in this country is to close the gap. You know, whatever we need. That is why we need to create more employment. We need people to be busy. We need everybody to be producing something for the economy. But at the same time, our political class have to sacrifice. They have to sacrifice some of their, you know, reduce some of their comforts. For example, when the government at the beginning wanted to bring out some palliatives, you know, and they sent a bill, you know, this particular government, you know, for maybe some expenditure that require to be paid just to take advantage, I mean, to take care of the increase in prices and things like that that happened after removal of subsidy. You know, unfortunately, the legislature was seen to have added their own, you know, about 70 billion. That was a bit insensitive. And part of that, of course, was for welfare and for vehicles, for operations and things like that. In a country where the poor are so poor that some cannot afford, you know, 3 square meals. Many cannot afford even two meals. In fact, we have reached a point at some point when even a meal was a challenge for some people. So what we need is to reduce the expenditure, you know, the cost of governance. You know, those in government should sacrifice. You know, they should see themselves as having had the opportunity, you know, the privilege, you know, having been selected by Nigerians. Of course, Nigerians have decided, from given all the length of democratic experience we have had now, Nigerians obviously have decided that they prefer democracy to any system of government. But those at the helm of affairs, you know, should ensure that they actually you know, minimize, you know, whatever it is, their penchant for spending money, you know, at the detriment of society. A lot of expenditure should be brought down, you know, so that it will benefit a greater number of Nigerians. And I think that is what we need, you know, to reduce. Even if it means, for example, you know, changing our political system from what it is, you know, which is the presidential system, which everybody said is so expensive, you know, to a parliamentary system, which will reduce the expenditure. I think we need to do whatever it is, you know, that will reduce the cost of governance and therefore probably make more money available, you know, to the downtrodden, to the poor, and then try to close the gap, you know, between the rich and the poor, which is what we have now in the country.
Thank you, Prof. While we were speaking, another professor came in. Professor Sadiq Abba is the former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, University of Abuja. Thank you for joining us, an expert in political science and international relations.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria, and happy independence anniversary.
Yes, let me quickly ask you, your thoughts on a day like this. 63 steps towards nationhood. I've asked my, guests who came in earlier, what are your thoughts at this time? I'm not sure, I'm sure you were perhaps a young boy too when all this started.
I was not even born.
Oh, so, but what are your thoughts at this time?
First and foremost, I should congratulate Nigerians for coming this far. Also, to at least build up the hopes that started 1st October 1960 during Independence Day. We are still on that particular journey of hope. We now recruiting as a renewed hope. Slogans, grammatical gymnastics, etc. But as a whole, I think we should celebrate Nigeria for the journey so far. Not Nigeria as a successful, or rather we have reached the El Dorado. No, I think so far so good. We made a lot of mistakes in the past. We are still making some avoidable mistakes in the present, but there is still hope in the future. If Nigerians collectively, not leadership, not followership, collectively are willing, ready, and to move forward. Because as it is today, a lot of things, a lot of people are dragging Nigeria backward, both from the upper class and from the lower class. And it is foolhardy at this juncture to blame the entire framework of Nigerians' failure on the doorstep of the elites alone. We have had so much years of blaming the elites without pushing the searchlight on the realities that is now operating at the lower level of the Nigerian society, which is the followership. My major concern for the past few years is that whether to agree in Nigeria we really have leaders, and whether also to accept that we have citizens. To me, the closest we can ever come across is we have rulers in Nigeria, and the best we can describe Nigerians certainly not as citizens, but as followers. So in between these two great extremes lies a lot of possibilities in the middle. And it is these possibilities that we pray and hope that either through providence or through conscious efforts by Nigerians, that responsible leaders will come and fill the gaps and limitations within that particular two extreme poles that are pulling Nigeria apart. So to me, as of yesterday, I look forward to today, that today is an Independence Day. Am I to celebrate? Am I to sit and lament? Should I join the bandwagon of people who condemned and recondemned the past mistakes? Or should I be among the Nigerians that are looking forward with hopes and expectations positively, with solutions to our problems? I think, I may be wrong, I think basically our major problem in Nigeria, we manage problems. We don't solve our problems, we manage it. And problems are not meant to be managed. Those who manage problems are on the express of national disasters. But those who take time, patiently and courageously to solve problems, then they set the pendulum of a nation towards progress, peace, stability, integration, unity, and development. So I think today we should move, despite all the limitations and gaps in our national history. I think if you take 63 years in the life of a nation is so short. To a lot of countries that we now model, or we now look up to, or we now celebrate globally, spend more than 63 years to be where they are. So must we follow their mistakes to develop beyond 63 years? No. But should we condemn ourselves that up to now we are where we are? Yes, of course, but to some extent, I think there are some glitters of hope. There are some measure of success stories that we are closing our eyes on. And it is this measure of little success stories that we are closing our eyes on that we shall concentrate. Then the big question is that, why shall we be in the future? This is why I think we should focus our attention.
All right, Prof. Adeni, you listened to Professor Abba and his early thoughts on Nigeria 63, and he mentioned some things. He was talking about perhaps deliberately having a system to get in the very best of us in positions where we can steer the ship of state in the right direction, or perhaps relying on providence. But you are professors, so perhaps providence is a bit chancy. So perhaps if we look at our processes generally within the parties, in the schools, perhaps looking for the best versions of ourselves, the best Nigerians, to occupy positions where they can drive, the dreams of the founding fathers. How do we ensure that we get the best of us in positions where they can really make a telling contribution to national development? Because as it is, this is what perhaps Prof is trying to touch on, in a situation where we have people with imagination to bridge this gap between what he has captioned rulers and followers. Get the citizens into the system, get proper leadership, sensitive leadership at all levels, subnational and federal, to begin to drive the processes to stimulate our growth and development?
Thank you. I think it's still our bane, really, that we are not too concerned about the quality of people that will get into positions of authority. Most of the time, quality appointments are guided by loyalty, patrimonial considerations, and of course, maybe the quality of contribution or the level of contribution that the person will have made to a political process, or even the service the person will probably have made to a particular candidate who is making the appointment. Merit hardly counts, and it's actually a problem, even though we're not saying that loyalty, patrimony shouldn't be a factor. Sometimes you may look at it and say, okay, I trust this person much more than this person, even though he's less qualified, let me consider him for one or two positions. But when we're talking about central critical positions, positions that affect the generality of the populace, you need some level of expertise and understanding. Because if you look at nations around the world that have actually made it, you cannot undermine the place of expertise. Lee Kuan Yew was deliberate about those, who man critical positions in Singapore. Many of them, schooled in sensitive, in high Ivy League institutions in the West. And of course, we know the pattern in Western societies where they do not joke with quality. China, where China was rising, they were mindful of expertise. I've said it severally, that statistics once showed that 100,000, at least 100,000 Chinese nationals were often in the United States on a yearly basis, going to Ivy League institutions, honing their skills and returning to China, which means that expertise matters. And at the same time, more than 50,000 of them were once seen in European universities on an annual basis. And they were honing their skills. The essence was to go and hone their skills and return home. Skills matter. You cannot toy with it. We need to be mindful of that. And think away from just patrimony or consideration on the basis of primordial sentiments. And the other thing that also bother me sometimes is that the average Nigerian knows the problem with this country. We know. Everybody knows, But again, look at corruption, for instance. There's nobody that does not know that Nigeria is troubled with the corruption plague, with the corruption malaise. But sometimes the Nigerian that is participating in the act is also complaining that corruption is going to kill this country, but at the same time is helping to perpetrate it. So nobody is ready to bail the cat. We're not seeing anybody, until maybe we have seen quite just a minor, just a few that has come like the angels visit, but the majority of citizens are very reluctant to trigger change, to bail the cat, and of course because of this, we are seeing a cycle of malaise repeating itself now and again. But until I imagine that until this cycle is broken, before we can begin to make some progress in this respect. We are conscious, no doubt. Yes, we have power elite, we have economic elite, and of course, you cannot toy with their consciousness. They are very, very exposed. Oftentimes, we refer to how people travel abroad. They see how things are done correctly, but the problem, the challenge is replicating the experiences that we gain from outside the shores of this country, back home. So why are we witnessing these disconnects, between our experience and our ability to replicate it? If you look at this private sector, for instance, sections of the private sector are much more functional, much more productive and efficient than the public sector, because they know that they have an objective, which is profit making. So why is the public sector failing? It's just a matter of attitude, which I referred to earlier, which I also describe as an intangible. It's about attitude. It's about change management, attitudinal change management, which can be affected, or which can be, we can change the narrative. If there's behavior, to some extent, behavior change communication, a concentration on, reorientation, letting us know that we have a role to play as individuals, not just for those who are in government or those who are in public service or in the civil service, but the average citizen that will have a role to play. But sometimes citizens may not even know. You've got to remind them of their responsibility. And in reminding them, government has a role to play in this regard too, through sensitization, so that they will not take things for granted. Complaining every day will not solve the problem. But somebody has said it earlier on here. It's not just about complaining. we've got to take action. It's not about identifying the problem. We have to move towards solutions and be courageous about it.
All right, in terms of courage, it's both sides. The leadership at the moment has taken some bold decisions, but we'll come to that in the course of the program. Those decisions and, of course, the far-reaching effect on the populace as well, and perhaps where we need to tighten our belts as well in terms of public expenditure. Let's quickly go back to Kano. If Kano is not, I understand Kano is not there at the moment, so we'll just put things in proper perspective by focusing, discussing proper perspective by taking a report by Mia Ogidi on the evolution of Nigeria since 1960, and perhaps that will whet our appetite to further discuss some of the lingering challenges and how to surmount them.
(1960), a long walk to independence, the birth of a country, excitement on the air, initial steps by the founding fathers give ray of hope to the Nigerian child. Another great chapter emerged in 1963. Nigeria now a republic. But the joy of the civilian child succumbed to military rule after a bloody coup d'etat in 1966. Then a separatist movement formed the Republic of Biafra in 1967, leading to the 3-year Nigerian Civil War. The sweet bitter taste of self-governance flooding the land. The guns paved way for the ballot once again. Nigeria became a republic after a new constitution was written in 1979.
I want us to unite in this effort. I want us to realize that we all belong to the same family, and we just cannot succeed if we are divided. We must not allow ourselves to be divided.
Civil rule short-lived again. The military in 1984 became landlord for another 15 years until the dictatorship era of Sani Abacha was overthrown by death. Bringing in Abu Salami Abubakar to midwife the country to another era of civilian rule in 1999.
Olusegun Obasanjo,
From prison to presidential villa, Obasanjo elected president. OBJ was objective in his commitment to sustain civilian rule. After 8 years, Obasanjo handed over to Yar'Adua, whose reign was terminated by death again, bringing in the doctrine of necessity to the country's political dictionary. And this favored the second-in-command, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Power is transient, and the constitution sacrosanct. In 2015, the unprecedented presented itself. A sitting president, Goodluck Jonathan, dislodged by President Buhari of the APC through the ballot.
Hand over the reins of government, I believe that our nation is secure, our democracy is stable, and the future is bright.
You have earned yourself a place in our history for stabilizing this system of multi-party democratic system.
Another successful 8 years journey for President Buhari. Not just for President Buhari, but the APC, as the party retained power in another contest in 2023. And here is the new commander-in-chief.
Our destiny as a people and a nation depend on our ability to share the artificial restrictions of bias and prejudice so that we live fully onto our democratic creed, that no one is innately superior or entitled to greater rights and opportunities than any other Nigerian.
63 years with 17 leaders, one civil war, but united by a common cause for a greater Nigeria, as INEC not relenting in pioneering new innovations for more credible electoral process in the country.
Thank you, Mayor Ogidi, for that report. Mayor's report moves us to our, our processes in terms of our political processes. We've seen, successive governments since 1999, from one to the other. Have we started, let me take a prof of political science, because this is your field. Perhaps even some of your students may have gone into some of this in their master's and doctorate efforts. Are we maturing politically? First, from the internal party processes and the leadership recruitment processes, to make sure that we get the best of us in key positions.
You see, in terms of political maturity, I think we are maturing, but we can give ourselves some pass marks. But in terms of political accountability and service delivery, we are, I think, retrogressing far, far beyond our standard before even colonialism, or not even before independence. So that's the contradiction that is facing Nigeria today politically. We had successful political systems before our encounter with the white men, before that is colonialism. And our over 100 and few years experience under colonialism destroyed and decimated those particular political systems and replaced them with Western political systems. Now, from 1999 to date, we were able to establish and enshrine a democratic system of governance. Now, the question is this: can we, by all standards, measure our success stories from the point of view of consistency and continuity in periodic elections and changing of government politically as a success story, as a sign of maturity? Or should we, on the other side, use political accountability and performance or service delivery, which is popularly called in Nigeria as dividends of democracy, as the yardstick that we can measure the success or the journey so far and our political maturity? So if you take these two perspectives, you'll be able to appreciate the fact that in terms of political maturity, yes, there is more political education, political information, and political enlightenment between and across and among Nigerians. But on the other side also, the level and the level of voter education is very low in Nigeria, because up till today, primordialism is the only driving force as far as our voter education is concerned. No, an average Nigerian, irrespective of his own education status, usually go to the ballot box, not with the intention of voting a competent person with capacity and ability, who understands the problems of the society, and who, by all look of things, based on the various factors on ground, or various realities on ground, that he or she has the capacity to solve those problems. It is in my tribe, my ethnicity, my religion, my sections that defines who he or she should vote on at the ballot box. So this, in that particular discipline, we are not maturing. That's number one. And on the leadership selection processes, I think Nigeria is having less than 10% over 100. Because why did I say so? A few years back, I had the opportunity, myself and one Professor Dele Babalola, who is in UK, were given the opportunity by a foreign agency to now understudy Nigerian political parties on their leadership selection process. And we were so devastated with the result that we found, that 95% of all Nigerian political parties candidate selection process, which we call party primaries or internal party democracy in Nigeria, is less than 10%. So there is no miracle you can do. Now,
when you say less than 10%, in terms of the transparency of the process,
yes, allowing the process to take its course, allowing that is in each political party to have internal party democracy, in each political party to run party primaries by the rules of the books, either their constitutions, their manifestos, their party guidelines, INEC guidelines, constitutional guidelines, etc., or electoral act. So these are some of the processes or methodologies that they must pass through. So if you now put them on the scale measuring scale, you find that all Nigerian political parties perform less than 10% in that action. So there is no miracle you can do for competent leaders to emerge through this process. It usually goes to the highest bidder, it usually goes to the very few selected, quote unquote, elites. So it is like a political conundrum that head you lose, tail you lose. So we are maturing in terms of political maturity, but we are diminishing in terms of political accountability and political system service delivery in Nigeria. And it all boils down to the values in our society. You see, to be sincere and to be honest, leadership, the way we take leadership in Nigeria, will hardly make it right. Because leadership is a very serious business. You cannot achieve leadership through accidents of history or incidents of happenstances in your society. Nations must take leadership seriously. If a nation wants to succeed, wants to achieve economic growth and development, wants to achieve prosperity, wants to achieve civilization, such a nation must go back to the drawing board and define from its own national values, national history, and national culture. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be. Earlier, Prof was alluding to the journey taken, the difficult journey taken by Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. We had the history of South Korea under Peng. We had the most difficult journey of the 1,000 steps by Deng Xiaoping in China from 1979 to 1989. There are a lot of examples all over the world. Currently, we have in Africa, we have Rwandan Paul Kagame. We have Joko Widodo in Indonesia. There are pockets of examples all over the world where at least leaders are now going back into the history. Nigeria doesn't have that particular, Nigeria should not be an exception. We must force ourselves collectively, both followership and rulership, to sit down on a round table and tell ourselves the bitter truth. Look, the age of pretensions are over. This is where we are today. This is where we're supposed to be in the next 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. All the vision that we have had in this country were not built on solid foundations. But on solid foundation. So, and we are a nation that is given to managing problems. We should now develop and graduate into a nation whereby we are serious with problem-solving methodologies. So, as long as we operate at that particular level of managing problems, we will never see we'll never reach our destination. So politically, I think we should equally define what sort of political system do you want to operate in Nigeria. Is democracy working? If yes, why is it failing intermittently? How do you solve those problems? If it is not working, what are the other options? Are we going back to parliamentarianism? Are we going to evolve? There is no crime if Nigeria evolves its own democratic system or political system. As
against copy and paste. As against copy and paste.
As against copy and paste. Even in America, they are having crisis with their democratic administration. So look, you ask Kagame, is Kagame practicing democracy? Certainly not. Are Rwandans happy? Of course. Go to Indonesia, look at the economic growth steadily from Joko Widodo's miracle. Go to other countries of the world. Look, things are happening. But we in Nigeria, we celebrate democracy more, freedom more, rather than progress and prosperity. So we should tell ourselves the truth. We should take that decision. Do we want to have leaders in Nigeria, or we want to continue with these pretenders that call themselves rulers? It's not different. I pity President Tinubu. He doesn't have the magic wand of Moses. He doesn't have the brain, the wisdom of Solomon. But Nigerians, every problem in Nigeria, including your own feud between a husband and a wife, they want Tinubu to solve it. So we should change these values. Nigeria must change its values first. We must have a national value. What is our national value? What is our national culture? Then from these two, we integrate them and become a national agenda. Then from the national agenda, we must have a national policy, collective national policy, not from Adamawa, not Lagos, Sokoto, or Calabar. This is Nigerian. It is not about North or South, Islam or Christianity. What is the Nigerian agenda? From there, we have national policy. that address Nigerians, wherever you are. From national policy, then we begin to say, what type of strategies are going to put in place to actualize this particular policy? So all these are lacking. These are gaps that no Nigerian man is willing and ready to address, because everybody believes that there is a miracle. Every Nigerian believes that there is a miracle. We are dreaming, we are fantasizing, we are living in a very, very, very mischievous world on ourselves. We are enemies unto ourselves. So long as we don't tell ourselves the truth, we keep on jumping from one silly mistake to another one unavoidable mistakes in Nigeria, and the history goes on like this.
All right, let's quickly go back to Kano. Professor Yushao Ango, we lost contact with you briefly, but hopefully that's fully restored now. If you listen to Professor Abba here and the mini lecture that he just gave to us, I was busy taking notes. But let's look at it from the sub-nationals. Before we see leaders at the federal level, at the national level, the center here, many of them are cooked and baked from the sub-nationals. They're getting it right even from that point before, getting them, to even bigger positions to be able to drive some of these processes. And then when you, intervene on that line, I would also want to look at, you bringing in your expertise on board in terms of the current realities and look at some of the low-hanging fruits, especially since you're an expert on entrepreneurship and finance, how we begin to come out of some of the problems that we found ourselves in making well for ourselves, for the nation to be the best version of itself in the shortest time possible. Prof, did you hear me? All right, I think we're still trying to fully establish contact with Prof. Once we get our audio lines going, we'll be able to get Prof's intervention on that. But while we're there, Professor Adeni is here. You listen to... Yeah. All right, I think Prof can hear me. So, Prof, go ahead, please. All right, we'll relink Professor Ango very shortly. Let's hear from Professor Adeni. You heard from Professor Abba here and talking about, our pretensions towards getting, the right people in the right places, and looking at some of the templates and the, countries that we've seen being able to cross the bridge between concept and actuality, between dreams and reality. How do we establish that? How do we, because it seems to me, we've said sacrifices have to be made on both sides of the aisle, followership and leadership, but it seems to me as if, when you look at the leadership, especially at the sub-national level, nobody is willing to perhaps, take the bold step of, making some sacrifices as an example to the followership, so that, some of these changes would begin. We had the slogan, change begins with me. We're doing that also in our political, life.
No, of course, we're not doing it. Nobody believes that you should bear the card. Nobody believes that you should show the pathway towards a changed attitudinal disposition. The attitudinal disposition that we presently have is one of a disdain, for the entity called Nigeria. Everybody is looking for opportunity to pilfer, and that's why you see the frenetic craze, to be in government, because government is seen, government appointments, government positions are seen as the easiest way towards the making of material progress. But one thing we have to underscore is that there might be reason for us to be slightly celebratory about our democracy, which I think that Professor Abba harped upon. Yes, our democracy is 24 years down the line now. No doubt salutary at the level of longevity, but of course there are still questions around the character of our democracy, which is why there are issues around credibility and integrity of the electoral process, and which is why we also have the question of politicians, participants being die-harded, with contestation. They still feel very strongly that when they win, being magnanimous in victory will be difficult, and when they lose, being gallant in defeat will always be difficult. And that's why we see continuous court, to the courts. This is something that is likely going to continue, except our disposition towards public service changes. And how do we make it change? It just, again, comes back to the question of attitude. But changing the attitude of the people is not a one-off thing. It's not something that requires a magic, that you can use a magic bullet to achieve. It takes a painstaking process, just like nation building. In building a nation, you have to be concerned about integrating the fragments, the compartmentalized parts, bringing them in, doing the right things, increasing their sense of belonging, following long period of longing. In changing attitude too, you have to be constantly reminding citizens of their responsibility to the nation, because they are not existing for themselves. They exist, yes, maybe to satisfy themselves at some level, but the greater level of satisfaction is often provided by government at the level of safety. That's why, in the first place, we talk about citizens considering their rights to the state, so that they can in turn protect them, consistent with the Leviathan. These things are not cast in stone. It just requires all hands to be on deck for people to know what they need to do and what they do not have to do. But in our system, we still have some of these things playing up because the right leaders, yes, have come in the past at different level. And when we're talking about these things, concentration shouldn't just be at maybe presidential leadership, for instance, but leadership across the ladder. And any leader can emerge at any point in time at different levels and become an example that people can refer to. We have seen it in the past, where we have agencies, leaders emerging at the level of agencies, leaders emerging at the level of state, being governors, and excelling. And we are often able to refer to them, when we see that they take decisions, without minding whose ox is God, without fear or favor, and making impact, leaving legacies behind. And of course, if we can have it in those sectors, in those sections, at one time or the other, it's also a guarantee that at some point we could also have it replicated on a larger scale, so that we can have greater impact. Remembering also that a good leader, or the kind of leader people want, can come from two ways. Maybe deliberate process of the election, of bringing him in through the election process, through campaign issues, understanding the pedigree of the person, or through happenstance. You probably do not know that the person will be gung-ho, the person will be radical in fostering change, but you just bring the person in and you see him going, being forceful in effecting change. Yeah, but again, the one that we should concentrate on is to make sure that it is deliberate. And how do we make it deliberate? By being concerned about who we elect into positions of leadership. Understanding their past, situating them in the present, and rightly making projections into what they will probably do when they get into office. That's why the character of our democracy can grow, as the case could be.
All right, Professor Ango in our Kano studios have been angling to, make one contribution of, in terms of the line of thoughts, the lines of thoughts that are being, echoed here in the studio. Professor Ango, first of all, we'll talk about the leadership recruitment processes, and we'll say, perhaps the gestation period must be at the subnationals, where we get the very best of them incubated and then, produced before we push them to the center to drive our processes. Is that happening, or have we completely entrenched the rub my back, I rub your back syndrome, quid pro quo at the political level, and not looking at competence and merit in some of these processes? Perhaps that's why we're making, going around in circles in terms of our leadership recruitment processes.
It's happening, but it's happening haphazardly. We need to, actually make it more deliberate. Look at, for example, China. The way leadership is recruited in China is clear. They have clear measures through which you emerge. We need more of that. Here, a lot of horse trading, a lot of things have been done. Yes, nonetheless, we are able to pick some good ones. I think what this country needs, in terms of leadership, we need leaders, that will operate more like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. People who will come up with some vision for the country that everybody will key into. If we have a vision, we know clearly where we're heading to, regardless of the challenges. At least there is a perspective, there is a way you are looking at it, and everybody is aspiring, and we know collectively we are moving towards one destination. I think that is what we need. I know as a country we have had a lot of distractions, you know, or here and there, you know, trying to slow us down. But I think if we put our, you know, if we put our structure right, and we have the right leadership that will now give us a vision. Let us aspire to something. Let us all look forward to something. You know, as a country, we have all it takes, like I said earlier. We have the human resources, we have the natural resources, we have the population, we have everything that should make us great. You know, everywhere Nigerians go to, you know, in other countries, other climes, they excel. So there is no reason why we cannot excel. But we need to have a common goal. We need to have a common vision. We need to understand, regardless of our differences in terms of political parties and things like that, there should be some things that are clearly understood and accepted as, you know, by all, you know, that we are all aspiring to, regardless of our different political parties. The approach may be different, but the goal should be clear to everyone. I think we need that. We need some visions that we can ascribe to, and then we need to clearly define from various political parties, you know, the processes and the steps. Like has been stated before I lost contact with you, I know that the internal democracy is an issue. How do you have a correct internal democracy within the parties that will bring out the best, not necessarily the richest, not necessarily the one that has more money, you know, to emerge? You know, those kind of things are the kind of things we need. So more than anything, we need leadership with vision, you know, leadership that will actually show us where we're heading to, and we all as a nation are willing to follow that kind of leadership, you know, to arrive at a certain destination, regardless of these distractions, like I said.
Let me stay with you and perhaps, you know, get some insights, especially based on your expertise, the areas of your expertise, finance and entrepreneurship. The President alluded to, you know, efforts being made to you know, get the nation running and on an even keel. Looking at, you know, issues of job creation, establishing domestic competencies in, you know, value chain development in different sectors of the economy. Perhaps could you create a scenario where we can, you know, begin to establish these linkages and make sure that we have, you know, jobs for our teaming youths, and then perhaps we could see this restiveness perhaps go to a lower ebb?
Yes, like we have been saying over and over again, you know, we have youth, and these youths are looking for something to do. They are interested, you know, they want to add value. So whatever we need to do in this country is to ensure that we engage these youths, you know, positively, you know, we get them to do something. So what I'm saying basically is probably we go back to some extent to the beginning of what we had at the beginning. You know, at the beginning, at independence, what the country was striving for was, if you like, to reduce level of export, you know, domestic production, to encourage domestic production so that we are able to produce what we normally will ordinarily import. That was the policy at the beginning. Now, I want us to bring back that policy, you know, ensure that as a nation of 200 million, we cannot rely on others, you know, to produce what we should use, you know, day-to-day things that we are using. This is what has been happening, and that is what has been affecting the economy negatively, you know, whereby we import everything, you know. In fact, we consider it now that anything imported is what is better, you know, unlike what is supposed to be. So encourage local production, you know, but this time around, we should add the element of export. You know, we should also, in addition to what we are doing, take advantage of our position in the African economy. We are the largest economy in Africa. We are the largest country in Africa in terms of population. So take advantage of agreements, you know, like the African Free Trade Agreement that we have all subscribed to, you know, to ensure that our products are all over. Yes, some entrepreneurs have taken the lead. You know, banks have opened all over Africa. Dangote has opened and has plants all over Africa. So things like that are required. But more than that, you know, as a nation, you know, just like China is the producer for let's say, global producer of most commodities, then Nigeria, at least, if nothing, should be a major producer for Africa. Start from there. We should produce for ourselves and produce for Africa. And like we have been saying all along, whatever that can be produced in Nigeria, Nigerian government, at least, should not, patronize imported things that can be produced in Nigeria. We are giving the example, for example, of vehicles. Why should official vehicles, that have been purchased, let's say by legislators or by the executive arm, be imported when there are Nigerians actually currently doing this? So whatever we can produce in Nigeria, furniture, whatever, anything like that, we should produce it in Nigeria. That way, we're engaging the youth, we're engaging everybody, we're making everybody busy, and that way our economy will be stronger, and then everybody will have a purpose. Everybody will have something doing. But so long as this youth that we are producing and that are all over don't have anything to do, then of course they can now easily be attracted, to other, things that are not supposed to be. So as much as possible, what we should do is to produce what we have, just as we have been substantially producing our food now, so we should also produce our manufactured products. We should be producing our phones. We are one of the largest users, like I said, of telephone and IT facilities globally. So why are we not producing those? So whatever we need to do to encourage that, to encourage local production, and then to dominate, if possible, the local market. That is, I'm talking about not only Nigerian market, but West Africa and then Africa as a whole. I think we have the capacity, we have the ability, we can do that. And I think that is what will transform the Nigerian economy and make it, to be greater, in the years to come.
Very much, Prof. We'll take this story now. Nigeria's economic journey from independence to prosperity has seen significant challenges and opportunities. As the drivers of the economy continue to navigate through renewed hope, experts are of the view that sacrificial implementation of policies and programs devoid of corruption is a sure way to economic prosperity. Benny Adams has that report.
The Nigerian economy has been marked by massive changes in the last 6 decades. While modern Nigeria is dominated by agriculture and petroleum, efforts are being intensified towards diversifying the economy in line with global trends.
After the First Republic, those are our grandfathers. They did their best. The Great Zik of Africa, the Awolo was, the Sardauna, the Makama of Bida, the Tafawa Balewas. I think what they had in mind was the country itself, not about materialism. But from 1983, when the army took over, till date, it has not been well because of corruption. Corruption has barely destroyed all the strata of the economy. There is no reason why Nigerians should be poor. Nigeria fed the whole Africa with rice, the rice from Niger State. It fed this country, fed us, fed Africa. There were earnings of foreign exchange. Kaduna was busy producing maize, feeding Africa, feeding the whole country. Today, where is it?
From the Structural Adjustment Program of the military in 1986, which sought to, amongst other objectives, reduce dependence on the external sector and eliminate price distortions induced by overvalued currency, Nigeria has transitioned through administrations that centered on improving the macroeconomic environment, pursuing structural reforms, strengthening public expenditure management, and implementing institutional and governance reforms, with key policies of the reforms as privatization, deregulation, and commercialization. The present administration then decided to bite the bullet on the issue of subsidy.
The fuel subsidy is gone.
NMPC was carrying the subsidy burden for the whole federation until it became very obvious by the time Mr. President took over that it is no longer possible to proceed because you do not have the cash to pay for it, and NMPC could potentially go into negative cash flow. Another word for it is bankruptcy.
With subsidy out of the way and the unification of the exchange rate in effect, the road seemed cleared for more investment into the economy.
There was a time when government had enough foreign exchange, it had enough naira revenue to meet its obligations and to provide the funding for growth of the economy. It had enough foreign exchange such that when people came in to invest and they needed to import raw materials, to import machinery, government could provide the wherewithal. And so what that points to is that we have a situation where if government doesn't have the money, it needs to facilitate and allow private funding, other sources of funding, such as foreign direct investment, domestic investment by Nigerians in all areas.
In the railways, in agriculture, in ports, things that are critical to Mr. President's strategy for increasing our import substitution and export manufacturing.
A project of $3 billion we are declaring today. Of course, we'll be meeting government and different ministries in Abuja in times to come, and we will make a way out how to reach to that level.
Drivers of the economy also say more reforms are needed to increase government revenue to grow the economy.
The mandates given to us are divided into three broad pillars. One of it is fiscal governance. The second pillar that we have is revenue transformation. Beyond taxes, even non-tax revenue, how can you optimize it? And Mr. President has said over the next, in the next 3 years, we want to get to about 18% tax to GDP ratio. And on the other hand, we want to reduce the number of taxes that Nigerians pay. So that appears like a contradiction. How do you remove taxes and you collect more? But it's easy to explain because we know where the gaps are. The estimated tax gap, which is what you should collect today, if people should pay the right amount of taxes, is in the region of 20 trillion naira. To close that gap, like the Honorable Minister has said, you rely on automation and the efficiency of collection, including harmonization of how those taxes are collected.
In all of this, the digital and blue economy are fast contributing to the nation's economic growth.
So Nigeria is on its way to becoming a superpower because technology runs the world and we have the engine to help the world power this new development.
Food sufficiency is at the heart of government policies, and for the players in the sector, it is about business, value addition, and sustainable economic growth.
Product of agriculture is now being consumed by so many other systems. The industries became consumers of food in terms of clothing, in terms of synthetic materials, in terms of medicine. Then again, the animals also now became competitors for grains, while the plants now require more of cow dung and other organic substances that are coming from animals. Now, to top it all, the human population keeps on growing, and so the success of every government is now weighed on the availability of food, not necessarily on how expensive it is. It's more dependent now on whether the food is even available.
Looking back to 2015, when the Anko Borers program was initiated, more than 3 million smallholder farmers benefited by cultivating 3.8 million hectares of land.
Since when we have started participating in Anko Borers program, there is a tremendous achievements and there is a progress. Even the challenges were solved because through Anko Borers program, a farmer, after capturing his data, even his farm will be mapped. So we know the actual and the accurate measurement of his farm. Secondly, he will get the quality inputs, he will get the required services, he will get good agronomic practice. Even the monitoring evaluation of whatever is doing, it will be there, a record. And also, there is another achievement or progress because there is a technology that was introduced in this program. And then also, above all these ones, farmer is getting it without any collateral, because it's a soft loan that is given to him. So now farmer, he has an access to the finance directly, because he will get all the required inputs without his even one kobo, as far as he has the land.
Having witnessed series of national grid collapses and resurrections, the present administration, in collaboration with the World Bank, says Nigerians will continue to see the light.
So in this area, there are 4 such mini grids, and those eventually will also connect to each other. So that's the purpose. Now, the idea is not for the World Bank to be the only person putting the money. We put part of the money like a subsidy, but then private entrepreneurs bring investors and their energy and their skill and their daily presence in the community. And so the government, the World Bank, and the private entrepreneur, together, we make this happen.
Though Nigeria's economic growth slowed in the second quarter of 2023 as the gross domestic product grew by 2.51% year-on-year in real terms, in the coming months, all eyes will be on IMF's forecast of 3% growth expansion.
Thank you, Benny. So many things to talk about: foreign direct investment, domestic investment, taxes, agriculture, value chains, all are in that report. Perhaps we'll start from Kaduna, if Prof. Ango is right there. You listen to that report. A lot of opportunities. At the same time, a lot of commitment needed to bridge the gap between concepts and actuality, Prof.
Not hear him again.
Prof, if you can hear me, I said if you listened to Benny Adams' report, so many things cut across foreign direct investment, domestic investment in key sectors, taxes are increasing. I mean, getting our agriculture well and the value chains, all working well, and some testimonies, of course, of some good practices as well. I said, but when you look at it, for those who will implement, we need a lot of commitment. We also need buy-in for those who will, be a part of this process. I said, so linking concept to actuality is key in, this milieu.
Yes, we have done reasonably well in, for example, the anchor borrowers in terms of actually increasing production. What we have not done very well, of course, is getting or retrieving some of the funds. But if we will intervene in various sectors the same way, and we have a purposeful arrangement, through which we actually want to deliberately intervene in the economy and ensure increased productive capacity of the nation generally, I believe that would be it. The average growth rate of our GDP now is 3 point something percent. I think what this country needs is a growth trajectory, at least of 10% over the next 10 or more years. That way we'll be growing faster than the population is growing. That way we'll be actually reducing poverty. And that way will actually be ensuring that there is better productive capacity of the economy as a whole. What we need, sincerely, like I said earlier, is for each of these sectors, to have clear, if you like, vision of what we want to attain. And then, of course, get this, everybody, every participant, every player, every stakeholder, to buy into that vision. And then we need to be firm, in our processes, in our approaches. We need to be, transparent, but then firm, because as it is now, if we're in some sectors of the economy, we find that not only Nigerians, even foreigners are coming here to take advantage of these various sectors, They know the potentials we have, they come around. In spite of all the security challenges, they go into nook and crannies, for example, to somehow mine some of these products, like what I'm talking about, mining sector of the economy. They mine these things and take them out of the country illegally. Or they perhaps bring down some of the forests, to have the woods and then export them illegally. So whatever we are going to do, we must be firm, we must be clear, we must have clear vision of what we want, and we must have firm guidelines and approaches, and we should not spare anybody, you know, in carrying them out. If we come out with approaches, for example, to support manufacturing, as has been done earlier, or it has been proposed earlier, I don't know whether it has been implemented, you know, to support some large manufacturing companies by the present government, you know, and to support some SMEs and things like that. All of them, there should be clear-cut policies, and there should be clear-cut approaches as to how to recover some of these funds so that they can be given to other people. And then whoever breaches them, there should be penalties that are clear, you know, for everybody to for everybody to know, and so that the kind of abuses we saw, for example, happen in the central bank will not happen. So that is the only thing that will happen. But we have the potential, we have what it takes, and we need a quantum leap in terms of growth of the GDP, at least by 10% annually, and I think that is the way to go. That was how China successfully projected themselves to what they are today, probably just at the point of actually becoming #1 globally in terms of economy. That's how we have to do it, and I believe we have the capacity, we have what it takes, and Nigerians certainly should be the better for it.
Thank you very much, Prof. While you were just speaking with us, one of the drivers of some of these processes at the subnational level just joined us. Let's welcome His Excellency, Executive Governor of Benue State, Reverend Father Hyacinth Alia, to the program. First of all, let me, you know, wish you the very best of the independence celebration. But I go straight to my question. We've been talking agriculture in the last report as put together by our correspondent. And when we talk agriculture, your state readily comes to mind, the food basket. But in recent time, there have been holes in the basket, making some of those food items to fall off. Talking about your experiences so far, having been given the opportunity to lead in your state, what are your interventions? Starting first on your thoughts on independence, and then your interventions to make to put Benue State on an even keel economically.
Then start to all our viewers. Benue remains the agricultural hub of the nation, and that can never be denied, respite of a number of challenges that exist. The Tinubu administration's program put out there on agriculture are quite superlative, and we're taking advantage of this. We need to increase our growth. Basically, this has been there quite all right. The primary challenge we have as we speak is the post-harvest wastages we experience. And where we are on that is to see how we can put stop, why the yields are going to have increase, because mechanization it's in place as we speak. Once we checkmate what it takes for the wastages to be contained, I think we're going to do good on that. We will require a number of industries to be in place to make the for us to have full value chain of the productivity in this sector. And what we have tried to put in place is, in the last few years, we had some challenges and a few investors could not come in. Challenges of insecurity, but relative peace is now brought back to the state. We are in touch with a number of national and foreign investors who are quite interested in coming to invest here in the state, in the sector. And I'm fully convinced that with the advent and then the intervention of the federal government, who has never rested, you know, in ensuring that we get all that it to increase our yield and then to increase our output in there. I'm confident that by next year, we should be able, you know, to beat our chest, that so far in the sector, our basket is no longer perforated, but it's now come back as a whole.
Excellency, one would like to know, because we've been talking about power and using it effectively to touch the lives of Nigerians and, delivering what, so some have described as the dividends of democracy. Before you became the executive governor, you have been known to, give advice from the pulpit on the way to go and all that. Making this transition, has it been very seamless? Are you seeing the realities now? Is it as easy as the homilies now that you are seeing the realities on ground and, perhaps directing the machinery of government to, create the changes you want? Just share with us your experiences so far in terms of administration.
Know that homilies are not easy either, because they have to be in line with the reality of what the people are going through on a daily basis. And so it is with administration. In governance, there are a series of dynamics that come to play. You have the good, the evil, the very ugly, all in one pack, including in civil service. And when you try to keep it clean, it fights back. It truly fights back. But at the same time, you cannot stop talking and preaching the goodwill that the common man has for the growth and the development of the state. My experience has been quite tremendous, really tremendous. I happen to have made some choices that would make the system work. Based on what we inherited, more liabilities than the good out there. But in the midst of it all, we are sifting. We are sifting to see what is very tangible to get along on the trip. But above all, we are on the path already of transforming the entire civil service because it wasn't no longer there. Because salaries were never paid, and the system could not work. And then you come to the other facet of it. People who are never carried along. Thank God we've done this in the past many, many years from the pulpit. Trying to get everyone, keep a focus on the guy above, on God. And so it's not that difficult to get the common man on the street to fall in line. But you discover law and order again are not in sync with the general thinking of the common man. He's looking for what he will eat promptly and immediately, and also that you are in troubled times. Transportation, jobs creation, and all that. And at each time, we try to let them understand the importance of everyone chipping in. You chip in and then we move ahead. And by so doing, I truly appreciate the efforts of the federal government, which never waned in efforts at all in ensuring that jobs are created. Our youth here in the state are quite cooperative. We've started a 10,000 youth ICT program, and I was expecting just about 10,000. I have close to 6,000 people who are out there wanting to queue into this program. I'm excited about it because it gives me a true picture of what the youth is even thinking. And again, in administration, you get everybody along, and then the system flows the way you're thinking and planning. It's been quite amazing an experience. And at the same time, I have a set of programs. Our administration, it's got specific agendas to deliver. We've worked with the people in the trenches in the last many, many, many years. So we know where it ails them. We know where the nails are pinching them. And that is why we want to get to the grassroots directly, so that they have the true effect of good governance, and then they understand why we keep talking the things we're talking, for them to see the need to get back on value taxes, and then to queue into seeing how they can get themselves individually employed. And it's part of my joy that the youth, our youth, in the state, understand the need for them to be self-reliant. And when we bring on board programs that would enable them to be self-reliant, skills acquisition and all that, they key in quite promptly. And it excites me even to do some more. Salaries are being paid. I didn't even know that it's their own right. Paying salaries, pensions, and gratuity should not be achievements. But when a drought of it is in place, and then you are all doing that, it's like something strange and new it's brought on board. And since we all began, we ain't going to stop. And then we're going to do many more things that we invite growth into the state in our economy. And then as we move all the way to the rural development, I keep assuring my people that they will truly gain the benefits of good governance and of democracy.
Your Excellency, will return to you in the course of the program, but I want my panelists to respond. We're talking about leadership recruitment process. In Benue, they have gone to pick a symbol of moral example in a Reverend Father. He's talking about, transition. Not necessarily he's still a Reverend Father, but understanding, the processes of governance and all that, and his experiences so far. Just like the government at the center is settling down with its policies, government at the subnational level, the governments at the subnational level are equally doing so. What we have seen in the course of this just a little bit over 120-something days now is the fact that we've seen a situation where government has released funds to cushion the effects of some of its reforms. Just like you said, Prof. Sadiq, you were talking about the fact that the president, everything comes to the president's table. Now he's disbursed some funds to the states. We've seen in some places where fisticuffs have even broken out in terms of the distribution of some of these, relief materials and palliatives. How do we get everybody on board, knowing that these are challenging times, so that the intention of some of these releases gets to the Nigerian that is hard hit by some of these reforms?
First and foremost, I think we are getting it wrong, the way we approach these particular interventions in Nigeria. I am not somebody who supports, or I'm not an advocate of palliatives. I think palliatives is just like managing my own problems and the other day. And what I'm looking for is not somebody who manages my problems, it's somebody who solves my problems. Like I have said earlier, and I like what you said, we shouldn't overburden Mr. President with responsibilities that are meant for a councillor in a local government. So since now this is democracy and power is shared across board from councillor to the president, now there are certain fundamental responsibilities that are meant for a councillor, for House of Assembly member, for a chairman of a local government, for a governor, then at the federal constituency, House of Reps, Senate, at the legislative aspect, then before you go to the executive at the president. You see, if you want to address these challenges, there are three perspectives to it. And we are drawing these three perspectives from models across the globe. There is the family angle. Family has a fundamental role to play in how nations drive its developmental processes. Then schools. The content of your curriculum at schools, from primary to university, plays another role. Then finally, the state or the government through its orientation policies. So these three dimensions must work, you understand, in agreement for a nation to achieve what they want to achieve. In Nigeria, if like this, the removal of subsidy and there is palliative, $5 billion to each state and 3,000 bags of rice. To me, I rather use the Joko Widodo miracle in Indonesia, or I use from African perspective, I should use the Rwanda's experience of Paul Kagame. And what is there is this. If there is about 500 billion naira, according to people that are there to be shared, I don't think sharing that particular thing to locals at the grassroots by putting 5,000 naira, 8,000 naira, 10,000 naira is going to solve the problem. What the federal government should do, or what all the chairs of government should do, is make sure you identify if there is 500 billion, divide it into 6, or divide it into ratio in such a way that how you contribute. If the South, if one zone is contributing more should go to the zone, because this is about democracy. And if you give that particular, if you share it equally, 500 billion into 6 zones of Nigeria, each zone should now identify its zone's major challenge. If it is roads, that particular portion of that subsidy service should go to address that particular thing once and for all, so that if you invest that money there, in the next 20-25 years, that problem is already solved. If it is health, that zone should invest in such a way that all the states in that zone are going to benefit from that health institution for the next 20-25 years. If it is security, if it is education, whatever it is, if it is agriculture, invest in a single sector of your national economy in such a way that this sector will be history for the next 20-25 years. That's how nations develop, through interventions. In Nigeria, you put trader money, 5,000, market money, you use this, you use that, and it's not giving you results. And you keep on. I was so pained when I heard that Tinubu is falling into the trap of palliative distribution again. This is somebody who is supposed to be smarter. This is somebody who is coming with a lot of experience. This is somebody who has spent a lot. There is no Nigerian president who has invested his time, his resources, his contact, his connections into the presence like President Tinubu. So I was expecting him to come with experience, with a level of wisdom and smartness, to at least digress from the silly mistakes of the past leaders and then address those particular Nigerian problems with solutions prone.
Well, I'm not holding brief, but to be fair, it's equally articulated, what is doing in clear terms, apart from, the reliefs.
About these palliatives.
Apart from the reliefs. Let's, Prof, please, we want you to, make one or two interventions. We've gotten to a place where, just like Reverend Father Isaac earlier, mentioned, getting the youth engaged. Monies have been released as well. States have had, some of their releases. How do they begin to target? He's talking of industries, but that may rely on, investments from, the private sector as well. But how do we begin to mop them up away from, what we are seeing? Because perhaps job creation first. Perhaps could even be the frontline thing to address the insecurities that were faced, in recent times.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's a question that we should bother about, because we're witnessing the youth bulge. They occupy a greater percentage of our population. And of course, they are increasingly conscious, increasingly sensitized. The youth of today is no longer the youth of past years. They are very sensitive now, much more aware. And the opportunities are also there, I dare say. What about SMEs? What about the agricultural sector that will tend not to regard that? Oftentimes, they tend to see it as something that should be left for the old, the weak, the illiterate, or the retired. That's why I keep saying that we need different levels of reorientation, so that our worldview can be changed, refined, made original in a way that will help us change our narrative around our behavior pattern. For now, our behavior pattern is actually problematic and is rubbing off on different sectors, So opportunities are plenty. Policies have been formulated in the past, but the bane was also implementation. And if there's no implementation, of course, most of the time they become moribund, and we want to restart another one, do all the fanfare, create showpieces, launch them, and it just ends there. But fundamental, again, is something that could help us overall in good governance, in sustainable development, is for us to begin to ask ourselves the question as a nation: what do we really want? Is it democracy or development? Sometimes we refer to, we have met several speakers today have mentioned Lee Kuan Yew, but Lee Kuan Yew developed Singapore not as a democrat. You know, he wasn't really a Democrat. I mean, he ruled for nearly 30 years. You know,
And
but
even
of course,
when he left, he was still advising the.
yeah, so it wasn't really, yeah, China is not democracy, Russia is not democracy, but of course, Rwanda is not democracy, but there's development. We are praiseful of Rwanda today because of the man has been there for 20-something years and is going to stand in for election next year, and he will be there maybe in the course of the next tenure. He might extend it again. But here we are, a landlord country, prosperous, you know, tourist destination, you know, able to satisfy the people to a very large extent, and the people are happy. The streets of Rwanda, of Kigali, looks like, sometimes you see some sections, it looks as if you are in Dubai or you are in London, you know, just because of the seriousness of a leader. And here we are.
Are you by any chance advocating that we return to the era of kings, perhaps?
No, I'm just trying to.
If we have a benevolent.
Excuse me, I'm asking us to put things in perspective. So what we do was sometimes again, okay, maybe it's leading me to make this argument that we have to be much more ingenious about our democracy. The democracy we have is one that is parroted. You know, it's not largely reflected of our culture, not largely reflected of our preferences or of our mores. You know, our traditional orientations. We just think that we can idolize the American presidential system. Professor Fonkano mentioned bicameral legislature earlier on, which arguments are arisen in sections that it is slightly expensive for us. Isn't it so? Faced with declining economy, declining resources, do we really think that we need a unicameral legislature instead of a bicameral legislature? Why can't we begin to think around this? You know, do we want to tinker a little bit with our structure so that we can have increased fairness? You know, like states that are agitating, maybe states in the southeast, maybe we give them 1 or 2 more states in the north that are poor, where the citizens are mainly poor. What more intervention do you want to make? Do you want to create an intervention body that will provide for the people in terms, I mean, especially the Almajirais, you know, or the urban poor, not just the rural poor, for instance, but the urban poor? What mechanism are you introducing, you know, to cater for different sections with different specific problems? Rather than thinking that the very expensive American-style democracy will suit us. If the political sphere is not rightly configured, it's going to affect the economic sphere. And we'll begin to see all the major problems we are seeing: joblessness, youth restiveness, you know, insecurity, banditry, terrorism, insurgency. What led to insurgency in the first instance? I mean, of course, you're asking me to stop. But there, of course, we know what is there. It's a result of the contradictions in the system. The contradictions triggered some of this resistance,
I'll come
which
back
is very, very unfortunate.
I'll come back to you, Prof. I'm not actually, asking you to. I was asking to hold the thought so that we can take His Excellency, since there's an Independence Day program there in Makurdi, so that we can, enjoy his thoughts before he leaves us. But let's, Your Excellency, you've been listening to some of the interventions, here, some of the contributions from our panelists. Let's come to you. They talked about, the political sphere. Yeah, yes, and the Prof will perhaps also ask you a question, but let's start like this. We've seen some things that, perhaps have not deepened our political processes or in terms of even, our powers at that level, subnational level. Is the money going to the local governments, the allocations are going to the local governments directly in your state, for instance? And what is your relationship like with your legislature in your state to perhaps deepen our democratic processes? And then perhaps you can bring on board efforts to, bring in, a deeper or more articulate program of industrialization in your state, since it is, known widely as the food basket.
Very much. Let me quickly respond on what I think about the palliatives. Prof. Abba has a different view, but here's my take on palliatives. Palliative, it's not a bad word, and its content, it's quite rich, that if we apply it very judiciously, it makes so much sense. It is not merely a handout. No, some people get quite nostalgic on that. But in palliatives, you have the immediate, you have the short term, and then the long term. Like what we have exemplified in my state here is people are very hungry, very, very hungry. Get out there on the streets and then you understand the full scale of it. Many people had no clue about the fuel subsidy that was on here until the pronouncement of its renewal. Then there was an immediate awareness, and then things started, happening promptly, immediately, and then the inflation now kicked very highly in gear and all that. But when you go to the trenches, you understand that people have a need for this. We talk about flooding. The entire last year was a wastage to so many farmers. They couldn't make their yields. They couldn't go to the market. They couldn't even feed. We have rivers Benue here and then the River Niger. We suffer this. In all my 23 local governments, then you are just talking about maybe 1, 2 that are in isolation. The rest are in the deeps. And then since this thing begins all the way from the Cameroons, just we share borders with the Cameroons in the northeastern part of the state here. And then it comes all the way down and then links to the Benue, to the Niger. So as an agrarian state, we suffer much. Now, if you don't cushion people, there are certain ways we can get through this. Today is the season again. And then in most portions of the state, most part of the area, the farmlands, they are flooded. Now, if you don't help the people to do the immediate intervention, where do you expect them to go to? But above all, palliatives in the middle and then the long term, what we have done in here, we've cushioned the parents. The state is taking care of the entire registration of the WAEC and NECO, the public schools approved by the government, whose students are in the final year. Their exams registration will be taken care of by the state, because we know how hard farmers have been beaten by this. And then the general inflation out there. They need it, simply. For the long term, in the state here, we have a drought of medical personnel. And in fact, it is even national. For some reason, there has been a huge flight looking for greener pastures out there. But until a good number would now realize that what they had, the pieces and patches they had here, were even greener than what they were out there looking for. I am trying to encourage all the medical students by the program we have put in place today. I'm taking care of a number of their fees. At the end of it all, it's under agreement. At the end of it all, they're coming back to serve the state for 2 solid years before they proceed. I think that is palliative in the long term. And then you move into the agricultural sector. When I came in, for a number of years, fertilizers were never supplied. We had a decline. Remember, check the indices. Benue tops #1 in the whole nation by producing soybeans. We also produce yams. We are #1 in producing cassava. Now, there had been no fertilizers to enable this. We had to get like 100 trucks, and then give to the farmers at a very subsidized rate. It's a huge cost to the government, quite right. Just as the other element of it all, we are trying to let farmers who are so into just yam farming to now kind of change or just diverse. Get into some other form of planting trees, like the economic trees. That in the long term, middle and long term, would be of more benefits to us. Talk about the planting of palm trees, cashew trees, and then the coconut trees. There is a very wide appetite for all these. You know, it's okay for us to get into farming since we are even on the banks of the river. But we need this diversification so that we're not looking for continuous flood. We are putting a number of things in check. We're calling on the federal government to assist us to do the dredging. Some people say dredging is not the answer. I'm emphatically saying over here in the Benue, dredging is the answer, because sand is filled the entire space, and once water is released from the Cameroons, we at the end here would suffer it, and then it extends. It moves into the farmlands, and then the result is what we have. Hunger, food insecurities, and all that. So I think palliatives will help. In fact, it chips into my answer to the local government. We don't have any alternative than to get straight into the local government and improve our rural roads, and to ensure that already we have a program in place, part of the immediate and the short term. We are going to enable all the market women by their groups, various groups and cooperatives, you know, just to have a little spike into their own businesses. They need that, because if they go down, we suffer more over here. And then there are a series of ways we need to implement this. If we make these rural roads for them to be able to bring out their produce from the farms, and then we also assist, even at the market, not pricing per se, but to ensure that there's orderliness. There's orderliness. They are not mistreated. They suffer on the farm. They must smile to the banks. And then it's going to add up, you know, to common sense. And then we are going to ginger them up even to producing more. So we don't have any option than to get to the roots of it all, the rural places. And we are already on it in the state here.
All right, so you didn't quite answer my question, Your Excellency, very quickly before we let you go. I said, is there money getting to them, local governments first? And then what is your relationship like with the lawmakers as well?
It's quite friendly. We don't have cases up at all. We don't. So if there are any that I don't know of, maybe you just let me in. But so far we have a very friendly working relationship, and we're doing so well. As I'm speaking, I'm renovating the assembly, the assembly chambers, because it's been down for many years, and so I'm upgrading it. If there were no good relationship, I wouldn't venture into that. It's quite costly. The money is going to the local governments, and the local governments are going to bring a program of their own project, the proposal, what they intend to do. This will be very under close, transparent monitoring. It's part of the deficiencies governance has. If you don't monitor it, you should not expect the results. So I am inspecting what I expect by monitoring this transparency. So money is getting in there, but it's quite under close watch. What projects are you doing? I'm a field man. You know, as a priest, you are not a cushion person. You are out in the field, in the bushes and the trenches. So I have to get out there. You got so and so amount of money for fixing those bridges and then the roads and the gutters. I'm here to see them. I don't need to tell you I'm coming. I'm also an ordinary citizen just like you, the chairman, or any other person. So by close monitoring, I'm very confident a number of things are going to be done for the good of the local governments as well.
Your Excellency, finally, of course, before Your Excellency, finally, before we made you, the people of Benue State, voted you in. We knew you as Reverend Father Isent earlier, so we give you an opportunity for a minute to give us a brief sermon on Nigeria's independence celebration, the 63rd independence celebration, talking about our unity, our diversity, and the road ahead.
The exact exact place we ought to be. Our fathers, our forefathers truly suffered for us to call Nigeria, Nigeria. There are a number of things that happened along the way that almost got us torn apart. But what unites us is even more deeper than whatever thing that will come to divide us. We need a harmony. We need to accommodate people. We are a hospitable people in our state. We welcome peace. And if all Nigerians would just exert peace and would know that this is the only place we have to call home, Nigeria, home, then we would be a brother's keeper. We would be the ones ensuring that things work, the system work. I'm happy my colleague on the other side there had mentioned Kigali. We got back from Kigali from a retreat, all governors' retreat. It was amazing to see an interface with the president. It's quite clean. The system works. Some would say, yes, it's a police state. But is the system working? The answer is yes, it's working. The common man on the street is conscious of even crossing the road, of what concerns the other citizen. He's conscious that he's not alone. There's discipline in place. There's law and order. I know at some point we had this in our nation as well. If only we remember this. To a number of places that have insecurities and fights and all that, killings, and I keep appealing to my brothers out there in the bushes. Please come out. Nigeria is the only nation you have. Once we are no longer as a unified force, there would be a lot of problems. Until you understand the burden of leadership, you would never appreciate what I'm saying. Families can transform Nigeria. If a single family ensures that, let's keep law and order. You get out there, just be conscious. You don't have a need to cheat the other person because you are government. You are security. You see something going wrong, just say something. We are the common ordinary citizens are the first security apparatuses we have before the uniformed. And if only families and then individuals and then organizations come to this realization, then we would all fall in place to what God even created. Let there be unity, let there be love. In fact, the scriptures have it. It is quite ideal, loving, and so fruitful to see brothers romancing, Like in the region here, I have up to six states that are borders. We try to visit each other. We're trying to ensure that there's no disharmony. There are no fights breaking up, between states. And I'm encouraging all the regions to do the same thing. But first of all, charity begins at home. If you expect a better Nigeria, it has to be begun from the home. You must not necessarily be a person who goes to the mosque. You don't need to be going to the church. But what must, first of all, form in your mind is Nigeria. We are Nigerians before any other thing. And therefore, we owe our prodigy this huge thing, unity. Unity. And just remember, if we are unified, we can fight a common enemy. And the common enemy must not necessarily come from the outside. The common enemy is within, and it's us. Let us be a mirror as we celebrate the 63rd independence of our great nation this day. Ask yourself, as the president, one-time president of America, Jeff Kennedy, had posed. We're talking here. Ask yourself, what can I do to bring Nigeria to a better platform on my own to add value to my nation? What is it that as a civil servant can I bring to the board, to ensure that Nigeria still keeps the system working and I enjoy being in Nigeria and then I become proud? You go to Rwanda, it's your pride to be in Rwanda and to see how things work. We must make the system work, and it has to be begun from our home, from us individuals. Let us take pride in our nation. Let us be nationalistic. let us ensure that Nigeria, it's Nigerian, but it begins with my state. Love your state. You love Nigeria. Happy independence, everyone.
Thank you very much. This is, I'll let the Executive Governor of Benue State to continue with state functions, Reverend Father Hyacinth Alia, Executive Governor of Benue State, with his contributions this morning. May your oil of anointing not get finished, and to continue with, activities in your state. We're also having on this special anniversary program, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Professor of Communication, Deputy Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Based University, and of course, Professor Sadiq Abba, former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration University of Abuja, is an expert in political science and international relations. And of course, joining us from Kano is Professor Yushau Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University. Prof, thank you very much for for waiting while we spoke with the Executive Governor of Benue State, talking about Professor Yushau Ango. He made some, comments in terms of getting jobs to the people and some interventions in the local, government, as well as his interactions also with the legislature. What are your comments at this time? And are there things that are instructive at the state level moving forward to ensure that the country continues to move on an even keel?
What we hope to see basically is a working arrangement between the legislature and the executive at state level to be at the best as it should be. But more importantly, we desire to see that funds meant for local governments are also released to local governments, because in some states, while this is being done in some states, in some other states it's not done as is expected. We want every tier of government to operate as it should, and for that to happen, they should have some financial autonomy. I know that there was an attempt, during the 9th National Assembly to change the constitution in that regard, but surprisingly, because some of this legislature in various states were probably being teleguided by others, they have refused to allow that to happen. We should give them all that we need to give them, but then hold them responsible, and ensure and hold them accountable to whatever that is given to them. And that is what I hope to see going forward. I believe we have all the potential in this country. We have what it takes, and it's only for us to be able to put it together and make all Nigerians work towards achieving this same vision that I'm sure we'll realize it. I believe that is possible, and I look forward to it. And it's a hearty congratulations from me to all Nigerians for this 63rd independence anniversary.
Chair Professor Yushau Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship. I come back to Abuja to take the final comments of Professor Abiodun Adeniyi in Nigeria 63. We've looked at politics, we've looked at the economy. Yeah. Let's have a snippet of what to expect in the future based on the interventions of today.
Yeah, hopes are really high as long as we keep our eyes on the ball. And how do we keep our eyes on the ball? We need citizen activity in the sense of reminding the leaders of the oath that they took, of the need, to tend to them, consistent with their promise in the pre-election stage. Citizens' involvement is very, very important. Otherwise, the leader will probably see them as lethargic. And the leaders too, ordinarily most of them, they came in, promising quite a lot of things. Most of them, if you look at it, are ordinarily determined. They want to leave legacies. They want to be remembered for good. No leader in his right senses want to be remembered for bad things. Sometimes it just happens that by the time they get there, they are overwhelmed by maybe the perks of office, or the atmosphere of power. They get overwhelmed. What matters in the circumstance is for them to remain strong-willed, remain committed, remain positive, remembering that in ab initio they had an obligation to the people, and that obligation is to deliver on some specific promises. So if citizens are responsive, leaders are responsive, of course we know the narrative of Nigeria will change. One, that will ensure that in another 63 years probably, we'll be talking about a prosperous nation, a nation that will be well respected, that will be reputable in the committee of other nations. It is not all bad yet. The future is bright as long as, like I said earlier, we are consistent, we are focused, and we are determined. Congratulations, Nigeria, at 63.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. You were here bright and early, and also in an attire of solidarity with the Federal Republic. Thank you for your always honoring our call, and for your interventions as usual, as eloquent as you always deliver. Let's look at an aspect touched by Reverend Father Hyacinth earlier, Executive Governor of Benue State, talking about his relationship with the lawmakers. Let's look at it in general terms. Lawmaking, representation, and oversight are the major functions of the legislature. We'll look at that in this report, because ensuring good governance is central to this constitutional rule. By implication, the legislature has the task of lubricating the wheel of nation building. In this report by Ignatius Ukwo, it takes a look at the impact of the legislature in Nigeria's 63 years of independence.
Taking off as a parliamentary system of government in 1960 and switching to presidential in 1963, Nigeria joined the League of Nations with clear-cut separation of powers among its arms of government. The idea is to engrave good governance through effective checks and balance and ensure sustainable representative democracy en route to nationhood. The legislature in Nigeria, both the state unicameral and the bicameral at the national level, have been critical democratic institutions that have shaped Nigeria's democracy. Apart from representing all segments of the Nigerian society and churning out laws that have impacted on Nigeria's anti-corruption fight, health, education, economy, and security, the legislature has also intervened in critical moments of national demand. The recent amendment to the Electoral Act is remarkable.
Quite a lot of laws have been enacted, and this to a very large extent has been able to assist in economic activities, in democratic development as well.
I can see sometimes people tell you, oh, remove the National Assembly, they are not important. This is a hallmark of democracy. The National Assembly have been a very good vehicle towards settling many issues in the states and in the federation also. We have no alternative.
The plot to elongate the two-term constitutional tenure of the president and the complexities created by the absence of the then President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua were addressed by the National Assembly.
During the crisis of the health challenge of the then President Umaru Yar'Adua, the country was in a crossroad. It's the legislature that have to come out with an idea, and a doctrine of necessity, as it was known there, before we were able to straighten out things, and the rest, as they say, is history. We are able to cross that dangerous point we are in.
If the Nigerian Senate had not been there, the third-term agenda of the Abuja administration could have succeeded.
Parliamentary committees have intervened in communal crises. Some political scientists have dubbed the legislature the supreme nation builder. Regular oversight by parliamentary committees of both the National and State Assemblies, scrutiny of financial reports of government through the various public accounts committees are all in a bid to ensure value for money and to check corruption.
To ensure that the masses felt the impact of government, we just need to charge the executive arm of government to implement the laws in place.
Through parliamentary diplomacy, the legislature has also played a critical role in protecting Nigerian citizens abroad.
Are you still watching the special coverage of Nigeria's independence anniversary celebrations, the 63rd independence anniversary celebrations? As we advertised earlier, as we in the course of the program, of course, we said eminent Nigerians will also be speaking on our nationhood and their insight into what makes Nigeria tick. As at earlier in the year, up till May 28, he was the helmsman of the nation. Right now, is taking a back seat to allow others to steer the affairs of the nation. Former President Muhammadu Buhari speaks on Nigeria at 63.
What I will advise Nigerians is that we have gone all through